Was that their facilitator was on the floor with them, and there was a sign language interpreter with them all the time as well for those who needed it. So not only did we have a mentor on at the factory on the floor, but we also had the facilitator. So the facilitator was learning more about the factory, but the factory people were also learning not only about the student, but also about the facilitation and how to deal with the students. Right, I've got 1 more minute. So our aim was to see how the new training system could work. And we actually found out that it was really very successful. Because, as we said in the beginning, there were 12 students who started the program. Of those 12 students, 1 dropped out, 10 students eventually, sorry, I know 2 didn't make it in the beginning. 10 students, 1 dropped out because she was a married lady who was pregnant. 7 of those students were employed by the company. So from 9 who eventually 8 who eventually completed the program. Sorry, I'm getting a bit confused because of some of the other drop-offs. But 7 of them were actually employed. So that's really a very good ratio. We obviously realized that this was a success, but we know that more research is necessary. We need to find out more about it and how to go about sensitizing. So good afternoon, everybody. Lientjie and I represent the National Institute for Development and Training. We are a training institution that deals with training people at, I suppose you could call it lower level, for work. And what we would like to do today is to bring to you a case study which to a large extent brings together a lot of what everybody has been saying, and to show you how what started off as a concept has ended up being a really good workable project. What our paper focuses on today is on 3 main components. Unemployment, as we all know, is very, very high amongst people with disabilities. The research that led to the development of a training ecosystem. It's not a model, it's really creates a total ecosystem. And then, as I said, we're going to present a case study of how this ecosystem has been used, what we've learned from it, and where we know research must go even further. As we've said, the high rate of unemployment is high amongst non-disabled people, but people with disabilities, it's up to about 90%. There are lots of reasons for it. Poor schooling, mismatch between skills and acquired needs of the industry, which is really our focus. And many students fail to complete their programs. They drop out, and they lack the essential competencies. So even though they go through a training program, at the end of that, they don't get work. This results in wasted funding and a growing skills gap. So it's not only wasted funding, it's wasted training, it's wasted time. A very big research project, which started off with Lientjie's doctorate, resulted in this ecosystem, which, just to give you an idea, we call it Goliath, because it is so enormous. And it includes really, I don't want to say from the cradle to the grave, but really from the pre-training right through to aftercare. The project phases and the resources are required right from the beginning. We have the role of each role player gets very well defined. We have management support, administrative support, and aftercare support. And the end goal of this is the absorption of students into the business, not just, as I said before, just training for the training's sake. And Lientjie will now go on. I'm not going to go to all the other things because we know all that by now. And Lientjie will explain the ecosystem and the case study of what, to show you how it worked.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you so much for allowing us to present today. It's really such a privilege and an honor. There are so many of my most favorite persons in this room today. Dr. Karen, I am one of your biggest fans. Thank you so much for your amazing contribution. Behind me, I've got my favorite prof on earth, because when I started with my PhD, I couldn't stop reading all her amazing articles that are so relevant. And what a privilege to have my study leader next to me today. I always said to her, I'm a special needs learner and I'm the student that never left her side. So thank you so much. The development of the ecosystem was really necessary because I have personally, as a non-disabled person, reached a stage where I am getting sick and tired of talking, and there's no action. For me, it starts with the Employment Equity Act, the changes, etc. Tell me, where on earth do you get disability targets where per province people with disabilities are getting born as per target set out somewhere in an office in Pretoria? And that is where, for me, the challenge should be addressed. Yes, it's fantastic to have a 3% disability target, but let us be realistic in terms of provincial targets and what really needs to be achieved. But over to the ecosystem. We are also brainwashed with employment equity, BEE, and everything that we need to achieve, that we forget about the needs of people with disabilities. It is so important when we have a training intervention that we understand that it should be a partnership between the training provider and the company that potentially want to absorb or employ. And for us, this is what this case study was all about. To not become a training provider that train for the sake of training or forget about our students once they leave us, but to really go that full journey with them. And Dr. Jean earlier mentioned the model that I've developed was called Goliath. The one last leg of that model is what the ecosystem is really all about. It was important to look at, after training, what is that onboarding phase? What is needed to guide people into the workplace? But it was interesting, what we've discovered is that we had to get rid of attitudinal barriers of leadership and management. And there was questions asked earlier, how do you actually get leadership in a corporate to understand? Guess what? Put them in a wheelchair for a day. Let's play deaf for a day so that you can't hear. Let's take your vision away. And then you will start to understand the living world of people with disabilities. And that is what we had to do. Roll up our sleeves, went to this employer and worked with him. It's funny enough, when you start to work with non-disabled colleagues, they are so scared of people with disabilities that they want to run away. Or they prefer not to engage. And these are the uncomfortable things that we need to talk about. So our approach was completely different. To say, right, let's start with sensitization sessions. But not to educate you, let's listen to you. Let's listen to the needs of the people and in this particular case, it was a food factory, and it was students with learning disabilities, because we also had to map the right disability with the right industry. So that was the starting point of this ecosystem. We looked at pre-enrollment, what is going to be needed, the accommodations, etc., recruitment, the selection and hiring process, and the accommodations needed there, the enrollment process, and there's 9 different phases here: induction and onboarding, the learning and workplace integration, what student support was needed, how to retain our students, not just in the classroom and during the training intervention, but also post the training intervention, to make sure that after we've placed them into jobs, that they actually stay in those jobs. And then obviously what was very important was the throughput and certification process, and then employment and aftercare. So these are basically the steps that we've covered in the ecosystem. I'm not going to go through all the details here. I'll just flag some of the issues here and there. Of course, in South Africa, there's BEE, there's employment equity, there's a workplace skills plan to adhere to. But once you start to work with corporates, then you'll also discover that they actually have hearts, and that some of them and most of them want to do these things not just as a tick box exercise, but because they really, really want change to happen in their organizations. But for us, it was also important to learn the culture of the organization, the HR policies, so that we could align our training to the organizational policies and to make the transition from training into employment much easier for our students. So it started with a technical walkthrough. This was, like I said, a food factory, and it was important that we embed the principles of HACCP, etc., what was needed into our curricula. Now, of course, when you talk about reasonable accommodation, the first thing that comes to mind with the CFO and the CEO is, how much is it going to cost us? But the moment you start to engage with people with disabilities, you actually discover that you don't have to spend millions. There are often simple ways of making sure the workplace is more accessible. Where's the timekeeper? I'm just keeping an eye here because I can waffle all day. I'm on my famous soapbox. Okay. So what we also did was to have workplace engagement sessions with the non-disabled colleagues to sensitize them with regards to the process. Okay, I'll hurry up. So interesting here that recruitment was jointly managed between the training provider and the company. And that I think is very, very important. If you want to train for absorption and employment, ultimately that young person must go and work for that company. So if you approach it from the other way to say, company, you must be happy with whoever we're going to train, then you get much, much better results. Selection and enrollment. I'm not going to go through all of these details. It was just quite an intense process. I think ultimately the success of this, and obviously we've worked with a very small sample here, but subsequent to this we have scaled this model, and it's giving us great results. I think the most important part here is that we need to take hands with industries and employers. We need to listen to people with disabilities and understand what it is that they need. Sometimes I think we overthink things, whereas just listen to the needs of people with disabilities can often clarify so many issues. So, with the throughput and all of that, I'm going to give over to Dr. Jean now to just share the results. but it was actually straightforward. Listen to the needs, support the non-disabled colleagues so that they can have a better understanding of how to deal with people with disabilities. And yeah, Dr. Jean, can I?
Something that Lientjie didn't mention was that part of the support while the students were working was that their facilitator was on the floor with them. And there was a sign language interpreter with them all the time as well, for those who needed it. So not only did we have a mentor on the, at the factory on the floor, but we also had the facilitator. So the facilitator was learning more about the factory, but the factory people were also learning not only about the student, but also about the facilitation and how to deal with the students. Right, I've got one more minute. So our aim was to see how the new training system could work. And we actually found out that it was really very successful. Because, as we said in the beginning, there were 12 students who started the program. Of those 12 students, one dropped out. No, 10 students eventually. Sorry, I know 2 didn't make it in the beginning. 10 students, one dropped out because she was a married lady who was pregnant. 7 of those students were employed by the company. So from 9 who eventually, 8 who eventually completed the program. Sorry, I'm getting a bit confused because of some of the other drop-offs. But 7 of them were actually employed. So that's really a very good ratio. Obviously we realized that this was a success, but we know that more research is necessary. We need to find out more about it and how to go about sensitizing. Sorry, my last little quip. Even though we had the sensitization program, and people said, ad hoc workshops, we tried not to do that. We tried to do this continuously. And yet, now that the students are on another project with the same company that has gone through this, when the students are spoken to on a much more personal level, there is still bullying. There is still discrimination against them. Small, it's not systemic, shall I say, it's not part of the culture of the factory as it stands, or the company as it stands, but unfortunately it's amongst the fellow workers. And that, I think, is another aspect that we need not only to research, but to find out how to get under their skin. Thank you.
Sorry, you. This is a lot.